Nintendo sent over Xenoblade Chronicles 2 for me to check out on release day, December 1st. Now, originally, I kind of rushed through a good bit of the game. I'd say probably the first 30 hours or so, I just rushed through as fast as I could. And then I started to realize I felt like I missed a lot of stuff. So I kind of stopped there and said, you know what? After 100 hours, I will then talk about really my opinion and my thoughts about the game and if it's good and if you should be picking it up. Now, it may be a little while after release date, but of course, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 will be around for the entirety of the Switch's lifespan, so I think this will be good for people who want to pick the game up. Maybe if you're getting a Switch this year because you saw Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I mean, only 1 million of them have sold at this point, so I expect it to continue selling going forward. So hopefully this gives you guys an idea of the game going forward. Maybe if you were thinking about picking it up, hopefully this helps you out. The other thing here is there will be no actual spoilers of story or anything. Most of the footage you're going to see here, mostly going to be me running around in the field fighting stuff in the first world or two, so nothing late game, even mid game really, will be spoiled here. Now you might be asking, can I get this game if I haven't played any other Xenoblade games, specifically the first one that was on the Wii or Chronicles X that was on the Wii U? And the answer to that is you could get it because it doesn't take place in the same world at all. This is think of the Final Fantasy series where you don't really need to play Final Fantasy IV to then play Final Fantasy 15. They're not technically related at a story level. However, there are character names and ideas and concepts that really carry on throughout that series. Similar here with the Xenoblade series. This is the third game technically in the series, and the Xeno series itself goes back quite a ways. I mean, we're talking like Xenogears, Xenosaga. It's been around for a while, but the Xenoblade series is still relatively new, starting on the original Wii. So you can still jump into this one without having to go back and play the others. So don't worry about that. So let's start with the story, because honestly, it caught me off guard and surprised me a bit. It's better than I thought it would be. They took some risks here in the story, risks that I haven't seen since the PS1 era RPGs, which is very exciting to me because it's not something I've seen recently in the RPG space, specifically kind of the Japanese RPG space. Now, the game itself takes place in Allrest, which is a world that has no actual surface. It's actually a sea of clouds, something you've seen in the trailers, I'm sure, maybe in Let's Plays when you kind of wander around. If you go too far to the edge of any one world, you'll just see clouds. And in fact, those clouds will actually kind of interact with time of day, or if it's high tide or low tide with the clouds. It sounds kind of funny, but that does actually affect gameplay, which is kind of neat. Now, there are several locations that are all around the world, and they are parts of Titans. So the Titans essentially roam around the world, actual creatures, and they're so massive that people have actually located themselves either in those Titans or on top of those Titans. It's actually a really neat idea, and the scope of the game, because of this, is massive. Seriously, I mean, it's massive. You'll be walking around a town, maybe you get to the edge of a Titan and you look back and you'll see the Titan's tail actually moving around. It's so cool to see that, and it kind of gives you that sense of, wow, I'm in a town, but I'm actually on the back of a massive Titan. Now you play as Rex, who is a scavenger, and in this case, a scavenger in this world dives beneath cloud surfaces to look for items that they can sell. So they look for scrap or even treasure in some case, and then take that to different towns to sell. And one day he's given a job to help these strangers that look a little crazy, but he helps them anyway. The idea is they needed his help to help scavenge different things. And then of course this entire quest goes sideways, and he's thrust into a race to Elysium, which is a sought-after paradise that the main characters are all trying to get to. So it sounds pretty standard on the surface there, right? They're essentially trying to get somewhere, and there's all these crazy events that take place. However, there's a lot more to it. And unfortunately, if I really get in depth with some of this stuff, it's going to ruin it for you. It will. There's so much stuff you should be experiencing on your own. And what's great is it's a little slow to get started. I will say that. But some of the twists and turns that take place during the chapters, it's all broken into chapters, really keep you going. It makes you want to go on to the next chapter to see what happens. There was 1 or 2 chapters I didn't like that much because I thought it was kind of slow and kind of boring. But then there are chapters later on that pick up, and it's just nonstop action, intrigue, and again, it just makes you go on and on and on. You just want to keep seeing what happens, and they're not worried at all about taking some crazy twists in this game. It really is something they're going to want to pay attention to when you're playing through it. Now, the battle system is the next thing we're going to talk about, and that kind of it's hit or miss for some people. Some people don't really like the battle system. Others think it's great because it does have some intricacies that you kind of missed in the beginning, and you have to kind of go and research and learn about later on because the game makes you do that. So here's what happens. You start the game up, and you do eventually gather party members. So you eventually have a party of 3, and when you go out and fight enemies that are your same level, they are essentially damage sponges. So you and your party members are going to be swinging and beating up a monster for a little while. Sometimes several minutes at a time. It's not like other RPGs where like Japanese RPGs where you go out and you'll destroy an enemy in one hit because you become so powerful. That can eventually happen in this game, but you need a massive gap in levels. We're talking like 20 to 30 if you're going to be doing that. In this case, though, the idea is to really be strategic and place your different types of, in this case, roles, and then, of course, your different elements. And in the beginning, it's kind of set and forget. You can have your different party members go up, just start beating up an enemy, and then eventually their health will go to 0, and you'll move on to the next one. And that's where I think a lot of people had this notion that that's what you do the entire game. However, it's not correct at all. As you get further in the game, that tactic just stops working. You can no longer just kind of keep one eye on it and maybe watch some TV or something while you are fighting. Eventually you have to get into the different roles that your characters play, tanking, healing, attacking, and then you start to realize that the different characters' blades, which we'll get into in a second with the blade system, have different elements attached to them. So you have like water and wind and ice and electricity and fire and light, and they eventually chain together. So what happens is you use a super, which there are 4 levels of super, and then you attach essentially an element to one enemy, and then another element at the top right, you'll see it kind of a tree, and it gets very intricate. Seriously, some of this battle system stuff is a little complicated, I think, even, but you need to be able to use it to defeat some of the later enemies. So what happens is you'll see a little thing at the top, and it's like water to water, then you go from there to wind, and then what you do is you want to do your initial battle, and then you want to use your initial, in this case, special move 1, and then you use 2 to continue that chain, and then when you get to the last one, you'll do a bunch of damage, but then you'll also put an orb on them. And then what happens is when you fill up your 3 meters at the top left, you can then signal like an ultimate move where everyone runs in, and then you can actually pop that orb, do a bunch of damage, and that really helps you really defeat an enemy all in one shot at times, especially when you get to the end to take out a quarter or even a third of their life to finish the battle. I know it sounds complicated. That's honestly kind of because it is. I think it's the one thing I have against the battle system at times is it's definitely not beginner friendly when you get towards the end. You have to really, you have to go out and like look this stuff up, research it. They don't explain it to you well. They should have a better tutorial for this because it's kind of like you blink and you miss it sort of tutorial. I saw it. I didn't even know what was going on. I decided to go online and look more of this up and research and check it out. Yeah, it's very, very intricate, and you will get messed up big time towards the end if you don't learn this stuff. It really is, it'll get really frustrating. So you want to learn about this stuff and do it well and do it right, set up your party correctly, and just be ready to hit those combos so that when it is time to finish the boss off, when they have like a third of their health left, seriously, you can just wipe them just like that. Now, I just talked about elements and blades, and that's because you have your initial characters. They're called drivers, and then you get blades, and these blades are essentially attached to each driver, and they provide abilities, and they provide extra power, and their special moves, and their elements, and their roles. So the driver essentially can become any one thing, whether you want Rex, for example, to be a tank, a healer, or a damage dealer. He can be all of those things. It really is dependent on your blade, which you could equip up to 3 of them for any one battle, and then you switch between them. So you could have, let's say, Pyra, who is a fire user. She could actually be there and become fire, and then you can have another blade next to you who has lightning, for example. I won't tell you the names because they're people you're going to summon. Pyros, at least in the trailers, but then you have electricity, then you have wind, and you could switch to them, and they may have healer attached to each one as well. And the blade system is kind of cool because this is a spot where Monolith and Nintendo easily could have added in microtransactions, but they did not. So what you do is you get core crystals, which vary in rarity, and then you summon your different blades. So you literally summon them like you would in a gacha game, and then they go through a whole random number system, and then out pops a blade, whether it's a rare one or in this case just a common blade. It's kind of all luck of the draw. To be honest, I've seen people draw the best one in their first shot, and then I've seen people take hundreds of core crystals to get the one they wanted. Just know you're going to spend a lot of time collecting core crystals, trying to get every single rare blade, because there are quite a few of them, and more times than not, you will end up with the common blades, essentially. But there is a place for them, which you'll find out later on when you get into some of the Merc missions. Now, the Merc missions kind of remind me of when I would play Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced. You would basically have missions that you yourself would not go on, but you would send party members that are not really doing anything out to complete, and you would get gold experience, and then they would get stuff as well, because you do level up your blades in their affinity charts. Now, the affinity charts, again, you can see how much stuff is to this game. It's going to take so much time. The affinity charts are kind of like their skill set, and they affect the different parts of battle in that, like a character that's an enemy that's fallen over, maybe you deal an extra 100% damage, or maybe one of their skills doesn't need a cooldown at the beginning of the battle, it just happens right away and you can use it. These are things that you build up through a couple different ways, either completing certain tasks like topple 10 enemies or something, or you send them out on these missions, they come back and then they will slowly unlock anyway. It really is crazy how much stuff is to this game. Seriously, the customization and just leveling up your characters even isn't even the biggest deal. It's getting your blades set up with their affinity charts, getting your character set up with their skills charts, and adding extra crystals to their weapons. And there's so much stuff to this game. You're going to be spending hundreds of hours, especially if you're into RPGs. But yeah, the Merc missions more or less take 50 minutes of real time, half hour real time, an hour. You send them out and then you go about your business in the game, and eventually they'll come back. You then get the experience and the gold and send more people out. I'm not really sure what the point essentially of it is. I'm still kind of working through it because it takes a little while. I think I'm just about at Merc 4, I think now. It takes a little while to get there because you're essentially just waiting for a countdown timer to end. I guess it's an easy way to get experience and gold. Otherwise, I don't know if there's an ultimate weapon essentially or something at the end of the rainbow here for me working through these Merc missions. I guess it's just an easy way to get experience. Now we're going to talk about some of the drawbacks or negatives of this game, and most of it I think doesn't really have to deal with as much of the gameplay as it does for, well, some of the other stuff. For one, the visuals is something you've probably heard about. It's come under fire pretty well, and that's because I think it definitely needs some work in the visual department. If you play in handheld mode, for example, it gets pretty blurry. As Digital Foundry has found, it falls below 400p at times. There are frame rate issues in the game, even in docked mode. They even found what appears to be a memory leak where exiting and entering a town causes sometimes sub 20 frames per second gameplay. And that's something, if you want to experience this game, you would have to get over for now. After hearing about the 40-man, 50-man team that worked on this game, I would hope that patches will come, and this is just something that needs to be ironed out as they get more time. So I don't want to say for sure this is an issue you may find a year from now. Just know right now, if you buy the game, you're probably going to go through some lower resolutions and some lower frame rates. Some people, that's a deal breaker, and that's why I'm letting you know. Other people will get over it and play it anyway, and it is something that they should iron out, because really with the Switch, you shouldn't be dealing with those kind of resolutions and frame rates, especially with a game that I think is very good and would benefit from a solid resolution, even a solid 30 frames at this point is good enough on this system, to be honest. And I do think in docked mode it's at least manageable, but man, in handheld mode it is noticeable, very, very noticeable. Just realize, like when you're kind of scrolling around in a town, you're going to see some pretty 3DS-like resolutions, I'll just say that. I also noticed the pathfinding was kind of weird. When you're walking around, say, in the field, and you're looking at your map, you're like, all right, I'm going to go here to this point. All of a sudden, you can't get to that point despite being like an inch from it on the map, and that's because elevations change, but the map doesn't really account for that or help you get to that position. A lot of times, you'll be at the edge of a cliff, and you're looking all the way down, and you can't get down there, and that's where you need to be. And then you realize you have to go backtrack all the way back around to find this one little ramp that lets you down. It happens a lot, and I'm not really sure how they can make the map better because they seem to go this route of elevations everywhere, rather than, I guess, an easier way to find your way around. I don't know. It's very weird. It's almost like they got very aggressive with their map creation, and they forgot that people need to actually get around without dying from falling thousands of feet, or even trying to climb a mountain that you can't climb up. A lot of times you find a ramp on the opposite side of the map that lets you up and around, and it's a little weird. I mean, I guess it's part of the exploration process, but sometimes just walking around, you get in all these fights that take several minutes, and it's almost like half an hour before you get to that point that should have taken like a minute, not even to get to. Overall though, guys, I gotta say, I'm liking Xenoblade Chronicles 2 a lot. There's not a ton of choices of big RPGs, at least not yet. We're waiting for Octopath Traveler to show up. Of course, Lost Sphere just came in, but right now, this is, I think, the best RPG experience you're going to get, certainly for the money. I know it's $60, but man, you're gonna get, if you're a completionist, good luck. You're going to spend hundreds and hundreds of hours on this one game trying to get everything. The rare blade system is kind of fun, although frustrating at times because it takes so many core crystals to get one, and then one of my friends gets it in like 2 tries. So, you know, that part's not fun. But the entire process of unlocking everything, leveling, playing through the game, the story, it is a complete package with some small rough spots, including the visuals, the pathfinding, and then some of the voice acting is a little off too. But otherwise, it's a good game, worth the $60, I think, and I'm going to have fun with it going forward, really probably for the next couple of years, just kind of going back to it until, of course, the next Xenoblade does show up, because this one did well enough. Expect another one. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below what you think of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, if you've been playing it, or if you're thinking about getting it now after seeing, I guess, my thoughts on it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.